First of all, I would like to doff my hat to Safura Zargar. This is the first time I've seen her in real life. I've never met her, though we both are in Delhi. But for many months, when she was away from the, you can say, public side, she was part of our prayers. And in many ways, she's a role model for my daughters and for many other girls of my daughter's age, young girls 15, 17, 18, 20. She and other girls of her age and all the women of Shaheen Bagh have given hope to Muslim women that you have a space in the public arena in India and you can speak up. Yes, it will always have its consequences, as we have seen in the recent bully by Abominable case. But there is a time to speak up for yourself. There's a time to speak for the community, and there's a time to speak for the nation. And that time is now. That hope was given to us, first of all, by the brave, dogged women of Shaheen Bagh from December 15, 2019 onwards. Permit me to say something personal over here. Within a couple of days of the protests starting, I was invited by one of the organizers to come and address the meeting at Shaheen Bagh. And I was probably there at India Gate on that evening, along with Arundhati Roy and Ashok Lal and many other writers and activists protesting against CAA. So when I was asked to come to Shaheen Bagh, I knew it was somewhere near Jamia, but I didn't know where exactly was Shaheen Bagh. And to tell you the truth, I've been born and brought up in Delhi, and still I didn't know the exact location of Shaheen Bagh. So the gentleman followed it up a day or two later, and he said in Urdu, आप आइए यहाँ पे कुछ औरतें इकट्ठा हुई हैं CAA के मुतालिक आके उनको कुछ हौसला अफजाई कीजिए. You come over and give them a pep talk. Again, I tried to buy time because I wasn't too sure what exactly was taking place at Shaheen Bagh. I didn't exactly know that women, particularly those household women he talked about, were capable of bringing about a silent revolution in our country at that juncture. But 2, 3 days later, I finally gave in and I went to address those women at Shaheen Bagh. Rather than addressing those women, I came back with many lessons learned. I had gone to talk to them about the CAA and about all the rights of equality which Indian Constitution gives us. But I came back with a lesson or two, not just about the Constitution of India, but also about Urdu poetry, about the marriage of Islam with the Constitution of India. As I stood on the stage to address these women, I was in for a pleasant surprise. There were these burqa clad women, hijab clad girls from Jamia, and other women from the local hood of Shaheen Bagh initially. They were all sitting there under a shamiana on a rug, and it was a chilly December night with temperature at that time around 8 degrees or so. And many of them sat there patiently with their glass bangles on their wrists. Some of them had the tricolor on the other wrist. Many of them had probably been given copies of the Constitution, or maybe they had just bought it or brought it from home. And I realized that these are the women who had never stepped out of their house except maybe on Eid or Bakra Eid or for Ramzan for some special purchases. And here were these women who had not only left their home, but they were for once not concerned about their husbands, their children, and everything. They've left everything behind and were sitting at a public square in the freezing cold of Delhi. I came back and I shared my experience with my wife. Next I knew was my wife said she would like to go there too and participate with these women. And as she was going, 3 of my daughters tagged along and they spent the night there. And after that, I started following my wife. As Arfa Khanum said, this was the time which turned the tables in the Muslim society. The women came out of the shadows of men and carved out their own niche. Remember, these were the women who had not stepped out when the Modi government was toying with the idea of bringing about a law to criminalize triple talaq. They had kept quiet or kept their objections confined to certain seminars or academic circles. but they had never hit the streets earlier since 1947. In fact, no segment of Indian women had led any social movement since 1947. So if we say that this was the led first women led by Muslim women, it will be a travesty, because this was the first movement in Indian independent India, which was led by women of any community, any caste. Men were happy to walk behind the women, and I was among them. When my wife would sit with these women all night long, when my daughters would sit with them all night long, I would go to nearby shops, have endless cups of tea and coffee, finally retire on one of the benches outside one of those dhabas or outside shops for the night. And remember, that was a time in Delhi at temperature of 3-4 degrees. But I had gone there maybe 4 or 5 times to spend nights. But these women were there for 100 nights. No praise is too high. And also, remarkably, these women, while protesting against CAA and NRC and NPR, were not shy of their Muslim identity. One moment they will get up and sing the national anthem, say Jana Gana Man. Next moment, they would be happy to sing Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara. But one session of speeches was over, they will all stand up and offer their Maghrib prayer. Likewise for the Isha prayer. Many of them carried their Quran Sharif in their hands. Remember, so many of these women were in the advanced stages of their life, 75, 80, 85, 89-year-old women. So they could not really read from their mobile. So they had carried their Quran Sharif from their home, and they would read at the end of the day, because it was their belief that no day should pass without a Muslim reading the Quran. So they brought that religiosity to the protest side. At the same time, they demanded their constitutional rights. This was the first time ever one saw women of India being so confident of their identity. Remember, in the past, when they were women of other castes, including women, all communities, including Muslim women, as in the case of Mandal in 1989 and at sundry other instances, they were happy to leave their religion behind and be one as an Indian. But this was the first case when they said, yes, I'm an Indian. I want equal rights. I stand for justice. I stand for equality. But I am an Indian Muslim. I'm a confident woman who is confident of her Muslim identity. She would offer her prayers at the protest site. She would read the Quran at the protest site. Just as during the speeches, she would quote from the Constitution of India. And through this mind-boggling mix of religion and constitutionality, they were able to ward off Hindu Rashtra and protect Ambedkar Rashtra. Having said that, one other aspect which I noticed over there, which I haven't noticed at any other protest or movement, and remember, Shaheen Bagh started as a protest, but it became a movement, was that they were confident of their culture, not just of their religion. So they very happily sang nazms of Faiz, one of which has become the title of Asif Mushtaba's book, Hum Dekhenge. They were happy to recite Iqbal's poetry, Habib Jalil's poetry, and so on. For the first time in my experience, I heard poetry from public platform, general public platform in Urdu, recited by hundreds of people, forget men or women. And we had this heartwarming spectacle of Carnatic musician T.M. Krishna, who can barely speak a sentence or two of Hindi, coming to Delhi all the way from Chennai and singing Hum Dekhenge. He sang it in Hindi, then he sang it in Tamil, and then he sang it in Malayalam and so many languages. We had a similar case with Shubha Mudgal. She also showed up. And Arundhati Roy, with due respect, her Hindi is very much challenging. But even she came and she also talked to Shaheen Bagh women in the language they understood. They made Urdu not just popular or acceptable, but they made Urdu a much loved language all over again. Therein lay their greatest credit. One other personal thing I would share. When my elder two daughters were born. One of them is 20, the other one is 17. I would often tell them the stories of two American tennis players, Venus Williams and Serena Williams, how they came up from a very humble background to carve out their own niche, not just in the US, but across the world. Because in India, I struggled to find them icons, role models they could relate to. Yes, I would tell them stories from Hadith and the Quran, but in contemporary India, I struggled to find icons for them until there came about Shaheen Bagh. And I'm very happy to note that all four of them went to Shaheen Bagh, not just Shaheen Bagh, the place, but also to the innumerable Shaheen Baghs which spawned off from Shaheen Bagh. We had Shaheen Bagh in virtually every corner of Delhi, and gradually in every state, every big city, every town of the country. In a place like Bangalore, in a place like Chennai, where people don't understand what does Bagh mean, what does Shaheen Bagh, Shaheen mean, they also came up with their Shaheen Bagh, and my daughters also went there. So when I decided to do my book Shaheen Bagh from a protest to a movement, I dedicated it to my daughter, to my daughters as much as to Shaheen Bagh women. With your permission, I would like to read that little dedication. Dear daughters, all these years that you have walked on this earth, we have tried to inculcate in you feelings of unabashed pride and unflinching loyalty towards our nation. When you were all younger, you would recall your parents getting you ready for Independence Day or Republic Day celebrations in your school with as much or maybe greater joy as Eid celebrations. To see you hop, run, and skip your way to school with a tricolor in your hand, a tricolor cap on your head, and ribbons around your wrist brought a glint to our eyes. Now, dear daughters, is the time to stand up for the same tricolor. Speak up. Staying quiet today amounts to disrespecting the tricolor, the national anthem, and all the shared values of equality, liberty, and fraternity that our beloved Constitution has instilled in us. Just as there are times to stay calm and let the storm pass, there are times when you have to take up the challenge head on. That time is now, when the idea of India is in danger. It is heartwarming to see you all occasionally join the Shaheen Bagh women and all other protesters, defiant in the face of danger. But it is not enough. If we have to answer posterity, you must do so too. This is the moment when we must all close ranks and count as one. Persevere, persist, be relentless in the pursuit of justice. Allah is Adil, the one who does justice. He loves those who do justice. So stand in solidarity with those who are opposing the injustices sought to be inflicted in the name of discriminatory laws like the CAA, NPR, and NRC. Be afraid not of the bullet that kills. Be afraid of timidity or prejudice dressed up as neutrality. Stay strong. The struggle might be arduous, but we shall overcome, inshallah. Tomorrow beckons us all. This book is for you, Mariam, Aliza, Juveria, and Michelle. Be like the Shaheen Bagh women. That is exactly what I meant when I thanked Safura. When I told my daughters, be like Shaheen Bagh women, I had a woman like Safura Zargar in my mind. I had those women, those dadis of Shaheen Bagh in my mind. And I had so many other girls and brave women who are still in jail because of all the protests and the movement of Shaheen Bagh. One small thing I would like to say before concluding. As many of the fellow panelists have said, Shaheen Bagh is still on. But one place where Shaheen Bagh probably has not been given enough credit is this was the first organized movement against a totally totalitarian regime we have in our country. Shaheen Bagh gave hope not just to Muslim women, not just to Muslim community, but to the Indian nation. It paved the way to our farmers' protest, about which we have all heard and about which the Narendra Modi government just went on the back foot recently. The success is as much of those farmers as of the Shaheen Bagh movement. Thank you.